Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, they have spent the last couple of months helping others, but now one organization needs your help. What Primary Care Centers of Eastern Kentucky is doing for flood victims. And the Supreme Court is back in session, and the docket is already feeling the weight of some monumentous cases. What decisions could the Supreme Court be making, and how the newest justice could make her mark.
Plus, we're making up for a dreary weekend with a beautiful work week on the way. The latest on sunshine and warming temperatures as Mountain News at 5:30 starts now.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. In the last 2 months, we have covered countless businesses and organizations who have stepped up to help those impacted by the historic flood. And one local healthcare facility is aiming to do just that, but is in need of some support. WYMT's Alyssa Williams spoke with those at Primary Care Centers of Eastern Kentucky to learn more about their disaster relief fund and the families they have already impacted with their efforts.
Like many families following July's flood, Jody and Tanya Johnson of Perry County were left with a home damaged by floodwaters.
Well, you know, the home is still standing, but of course it had to be, everything had to be torn out and start back new.
But thanks to Primary Care Centers of Eastern Kentucky, the Johnsons were able to check household appliances off their list of things they needed.
Well, at first I thought, there's no way this is really true. There's no way. But we were contacted by a family friend who said, yes, please go apply this. This is real. So we did and received a response.
PCCEK has partnered with the Kentucky Primary Care Association to create the Rural Health Collaborative Disaster Recovery Grant, which helps to give flood victims new household appliances.
Appliances, we picked that because people were starting to get their houses cleaned and they didn't have anything. They didn't have anywhere to store their food, prepare their food, wash their clothes. So we picked appliances because we felt like that was the next important thing.
Primary Care has helped 142 families with this grant program, but they are asking for additional support to keep this work going.
It is in such desperate need that we are now sitting with 105 applications waiting to be funded, and we've run out of funds for this. So we are really in desperate need of major donors.
Hoping to receive the help they need to continue helping families across the region who need it most. In Perry County, Alyssa Williams, WYMT Mountain News.
Those with primary care say they are grateful for the support they have already received in these efforts, but because the need is so great, they want to continue helping if they can. We have more on the Kentucky Rural Health Collaborative on our website at WYMT.com.
Well, if you joined us for First at 4, we talked about how it was a tale of 3/3 of the region, and that is still in place as we head through the bottom of the 5 o'clock hour. Outside right now, over in London, plenty of sunshine. In fact, not a cloud in sight. They got up to 67 so far. Here in Hazard, we're at 64. The view outside the front door here at WYMT. But you notice a few of those clouds beginning to increase, or at least decrease through the area. And the sun is back out from our Pikeville Medical Center camera there in Pikeville. 56 the current reading there. And we'll continue to see that as we head through the remainder of the evening. Those clouds continuing to diminish. You see where the clouds have been today, though. 56 still. Pikeville and Clintwood. 52 the reading in Wise. 66 Jonesville. 64 in Hazard. Somerset's got to 70 today. The last of the clouds continuing to push out of the region as we work through the evening, but still hanging tough. Places like Pike County, Letcher County, Dickinson, Buchanan, and Wise counties. But slowly but surely, we're getting those clouds on out of here. Download that First Alert weather app through the nighttime hours. You'll see we fall through the 50s into the 40s overnight, and some of us, I think, are going to make a run into the upper 30s. Now, coming up, I'll have details on a warm-up on the way this week before a big-time cool-down. The full details on the way. Steve?
All right, Evan, thank you. President Joe Biden and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden got a first-hand view of the damage Hurricane Fiona brought to Puerto Rico. The Ponce region of the U.S. territory was especially ravaged from the storm a few weeks ago, but as of Sunday evening, nearly 90% of residents have had their power restored. The Bidens, along with FEMA's administrator, met with residents and took part in a community project that bags essential items for those in need. President Biden also announced a large amount of monetary help from the bipartisan infrastructure law.
We have to do more. We have to ensure that when the next hurricane strikes, Puerto Rico is ready. Today, I'm announcing more than $60 million in funding to help coastal areas in Puerto Rico become better prepared for the storm.
That money will be used to bolster Puerto Rico against future threats from Mother Nature. The Supreme Court's new term got underway this morning with its first black female justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, participating in the arguments. Many observers expect the court's 6-3 conservative majority will continue to steer the country to the right after its bombshell decision to overturn Roe v. Wade. CBS's Skylar Henry reports from Washington.
History was made as the Supreme Court's new term got underway this morning. Ketanji Brown Jackson became the first black woman on the bench since its beginning in 1789. Justice Jackson was an active participant in the first arguments, including in a case challenging the EPA's authority to regulate wetlands under the Clean Water Act.
404G is unenlightening as to the meaning of waters in the Isles.
All right, well, let me try to bring some enlightenment to it.
Jackson was President Biden's choice to replace Stephen Breyer, who retired in the summer. Her appointment means the court has 4 female justices for the first time in the court's 233-year history.
The question is, how much is she going to change the conversation? It's an old cliche, but the idea is every time there's a new justice, there's a new court.
Many observers believe the Supreme Court's 6-3 conservative supermajority will continue to push the country further to the right, following last summer's decision to overturn Roe v. Wade.
She's going to be writing a lot of dissents for a long time. There's no question about that. There's a 3-person liberal minority on this court. She's one of the 3 liberals.
During this term, the court is going to hear cases involving several hot-button issues, such as voting rights. One case could result in state legislatures being granted near total control over elections, including those for federal offices. Also on the docket is a case revisiting race as a factor in college admissions. Another case involves a Colorado web designer who refuses to build websites for same-sex couples. Both cases could upend decades-old precedents and practices. Skylar Henry, CBS News, Washington.
Today, spectators returned to the Supreme Court gallery for the first time in more than 2.5 years. Members of the public had been banned since the pandemic broke out in March of 2020. 2 of the 9 cases added to the Supreme Court's docket have to do with the future of internet speech. In hearing Gonzalez versus Google, the justices will consider the scope of a federal law that social media companies say protects them from lawsuits. It could open up fresh risks for tech platforms, including Google, Meta, and Twitter. And with Twitter versus Tammany, the Supreme Court will consider whether social media companies can be sued for aiding and abetting an act of terrorism when the companies host user content supportive of a group responsible for violence. The defamation lawsuit against MyPillow CEO Mike Lindell will move forward. Dominion Voting Systems is suing Lindell for spreading claims that Dominion rigged its voting machines in favor of Joe Biden in the 2020 presidential election. Today, the Supreme Court declined to consider Lindell's attempt to block the case. Dominion is seeking more than $1 billion in damages. Today, prosecutors began laying out their case in one of the highest profile trials in connection to the January 6th Capitol assault. The U.S. government is asking the jury to convict the 5 members of the far-right group Oath Keepers on charges of seditious conspiracy. They're accused of plotting an armed rebellion to stop the peaceful transfer of power from former President Donald Trump to Joe Biden. All 5 have pleaded not guilty. CBS's Deborah Alfarone has more from Washington.
Opening arguments began in a Washington, D.C. federal court in the trial of Elmer Stewart Rhodes, the founder of the far-right group Oath Keepers, and 4 of his associates. They're charged with seditious conspiracy, the most serious to date in connection to the January 6th storming of the U.S. Capitol. It carries a possible 20-year prison sentence. In court, prosecutors told the jury that the defendants, quote, concocted a plan for an armed rebellion to shatter a bedrock of American democracy.
The seditious conspiracy charge here really shows you tried to wage war on the most precious thing to us, the peaceful transfer of power.
Defense attorneys told the jury Monday that the defendants did nothing illegal and that the government's case against them was completely wrong.
The defense also plans to argue that Rhodes of Granbury, Texas, was not at the Capitol on January 6th and that he and his subordinates were only preparing to act on former President Trump's behalf, waiting for him to invoke the Insurrection Act.
We know that the former president didn't invoke the Insurrection Act, and even if he did, it would not have allowed them to take these actions.
So far, more than 900 people have been charged in connection to the riots on that precarious day. Deborah Alfarone, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
The U.S. government's last successful seditious conspiracy trial, which resulted in a conviction, was almost 30 years ago. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, juggling credit card balances across multiple cards. One expert's take on the best way to work your way out of debt.
Plus, plenty of sunshine on the way and no hurricanes or their remnants in sight. The latest on the beautiful week ahead on the way.